Really precious. So, hello everyone. My name is Donanne. I've been working with the DYW LED team, helping them with this new Ruby import file. First of all, we owe you guys an apology and then also a massive thank you. The apology being that when the Ruby licenses got stopped for yourselves to obviously input your activity to Ruby, we had to work at pace to create a file that we could then send out to you. And despite all that, and we created a file and we tried to make it as informative with comments and drop down boxes as possible so that it was sort of self-explanatory for you to complete. We still manage an 80% return, which was phenomenal. But what we've done is looked at the lessons learned from that kind of quarter one submission, and we've enhanced the file. But the other thing we were really keen to do was run this session with you guys to basically cover off all the myth busting on the file, show you the new changes and take you through the process. So this session really, guys, is for yourselves, as interactive as possible. Morning there. I'm misreading. So hi there. We've only just started and we are recording, so no problem at all. Good for you to join. Okay, so what the plan of attack is I'm going to show you the new kind of import file. So there's just been some slight changes there, and I'll take you through that. If you've got any questions, even if you could just raise your hand and I'll get Rebecca just to field the questions, and the two of us will work at responding to any queries you've got. As I've said, we're recording the session for any of your colleagues in any other schools that can't make it, or even colleagues in your own school that you want to share this information with. And what we will be doing is taking notes throughout, because what we want to do is build up a frequently asked questions sort of resource that we can then obviously share as well. So this session's for you, and yep, we'll crack on. So what I'm going to do first is I'm just going to jump on and share my screen, and I'm going to, there we go, and we'll just make sure. Rebecca, is that coming through okay?
Yeah, it's perfect.
Right, great stuff. Okay, so what you should now be seeing in front of you is the sort of the improved import file that we've been working on. There have been some changes, and I'll be able to explain why as such. Okay, so first things first, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take you through the file and what all the fields are, and highlight some of the reasons why we need information completed in the fields. At that point, any questions at all, please just jump in. Then what we'll do is we'll show you a sample file of how you can complete it and how to use this new employers linked file. So this is going to allow you to be able to look up the employer name and employer number as they're actually held on the Ruby system just now. Okay, so on the screen at the moment, what we've got is this is just a blank master file. What we're going to be concentrating on here is actually looking at the field headings along the top. Now, starters for 10 is with column A. What we have done is this column is your employee number. Okay, now you don't know at the moment what the employee number is on Ruby, but what we are actually doing now is we've got a basically as long as you've got an internet connection, the moment you load this employer link file, which you should already have, but if you've not, please pop it in the chat and we'll make sure we'll get this to you. But this allows you actually to look up your employers as they are recorded on the Ruby system. And what's important is the number on the employer and the exact name of the employer, and we will come back to that, because this import file that you now complete for us, if the employer number and employee name don't match what's on Ruby, it will reject it automatically. So, we're sort of relying on you. If you can use this file and complete your employer details accurately, that would be amazing. Okay, working through the columns, I'm just going to go from left to right. Activity status at the moment, Scottish Government is interested in anything that you deliver. So the activity status is already preset as being delivered in your file. Working across the local authority location, you are the schools that are within the Eastern Bartonshire region. Again, that will be preset for you. Likewise, column E, your DYW regional group will be set to LED. Going across, this next field where it says school/college will be preset with your school name in there and also your school Rubi number again. So another thing that you don't need to worry about, having to complete. So I'm just going to work through these fields. The activity name. So what we have done, sorry, jumping on ahead here. If you click on a field and it's not bringing up a pop-up box or any comments or anything like that, this is where it's a free format field and we're looking for you to put your information in. Hopefully they're self-explanatory, but again, if anybody, thinks that we could enhance that, please let us know. Activity name is essentially the activity name that you're running, free format, and you pop that in there, okay? But when we come to activity category, what we have done is to try and make this as easy as possible for you to complete quickly as well. The activity category, again, there's a comments box in there. It's a drop-down box. But what it's just saying here is that please, we need you to select the activity category. It's really important for the information to come through to the Scottish Government KPIs. But so we've got these options of the activity categories in there, okay? The other thing there is that if you do leave your activity category as other, which can be the case sometimes with like CPD activities, then just bear in mind that that will be excluded from your KPI report. Now, one of the things we did try to do to support yourselves in the schools was being able to understand what activity types go with what activity categories. And apologies, I should have probably jumped into this first of all, but this Excel worksheet that we've got in front of us just now has some additional sheet tabs as well. The help notes is just a marker tab, okay? But what we have here is a bit of a ready reckoner in terms of a lookup to assist you. And what this will do is it'll list, okay, if your activity category is work, inspiration, preparation, then these are potentially the activity types that would fall under there. And likewise, sample employee activity names, and then possibly, it just looks at what are the supporting organisations. So please, this resource is here in order to be able to help you complete your employer activity file. Okay, we will come on. There is another tab there to do with when you've got to establish whether it's a DYW partner activity, and we'll come back to that tab when we come to that field. All right. So moving back, yep, we're on activity category. You select from the box. That's all we're asking you to do. The activity type, exactly the same. You've got a lookup sheet there. And what we want to do is to try and kind of match these up, okay? And really, ultimately, between activity category and activity type, we want, the more we can demonstrate a fair amount of activity across all of these sort of category labels, the better it is for the KPIs. As we move forward, previously in the file you had in Q1, the sector focus of activity was essentially a list of lots of sectors. What we did find, what had happened there, we only had one column showing the sector focus of activity, but the actual file that went into Ruby actually gives you space to select up to 3 sectors for that activity that you're running. Now, bear in mind, if you've only got one sector that fits, it's absolutely fine, but if you can complete it just by selecting the appropriate sector from the drop-down box, that would be great. Now, a common sort of what we noticed with a lot of the files that were submitted across Lanarkshire and Eastern Bartonshire, as well as even in Glasgow too, was that sometimes these drop-down boxes had been over-typed. There should be no need to do that. You should just literally click on the cell and select from the drop-down box, for instance, digital. And the reason why I'm kind of highlighting not to overtype the drop-down box is that if, for instance, what we found was sometimes they would overtype with even an option that wasn't in the list. For instance, education was a common one. This could be where you've got a young person that maybe does work experience at the school. Again, Rebecca, you might even be able to jump in with sort of other examples there. But what we were kind of getting at here was that you have to pick a sector that's in the list, okay? If you're not sure on what sector to complete, reach out to Rebecca. She's there to help, but just some common pointers. So that one where we found that people were overtyping and using education, ultimately education will fall under public sector as such. So, again, just to give you some guidance, if you could select that one, that would be ideal. But we've really got to work with the sectors in there. If you're not sure, reach out to Rebecca and she'll be able to give you some best advice. But what we are looking to do is to look at some of the other sectors where we find they don't quite fit in with the ones that are listed there. Again, so we can create a sort of ready reckoner sheet. But again, your feedback would be great based on the sectors of the employers that you're working with at the moment. So the really across columns J, K and L, you've got up to 3 sectors that you can select for this activity that you're running. Okay. Rebecca, anything else there that you would like to add?
An example as if it's a construction activity, but it's based on green energy or net zero, then you might select digital construction in the first column and green
Economy in the
economy
next.
in the next. And obviously then leave the third one blank. We're not asking you or telling you need to have 3. We're just saying if it does fit other categories, it would be good, and it tells a better story about the activity that you've been involved with or your school's been involved with.
Perfect. Thank you so much. So, yep, so that kind of boxes off the sector focus of activity. Again, working through the columns, the next one, activity origin. Again, we're looking for you really to work from left to right in this file and just complete as much as possible. But there are some core fields that I will highlight to you. Ideally, we can't really have them left blank, or we're just not reflecting the good work that you guys are doing in the KPIs. And that's the key point there. Activity origin, self-explanatory, pick one from the list. Your delivery method, again, the options are there. Please pick from the list too. Then what will happen was before we moved into target audience. Now, target audience, again, only actually had one column showing in the last file, but there is the potential to have up to 7. So you could, and as you can see here, you might be running something that's across S4 to S6, or it might even be from S1 all the way through to S6. So what you've got here is the ability to just go across and select the target audiences, just one in each column, for the ones that relate to the activity that you're actually involved with or actually running. Okay. Another thing then, Rebecca, just to go back to target audience, is there anything there you would like to add to the rest of the
think
guys there?
it's fairly straightforward. Where before you were putting in the target audience with a comma and then the next one, now we just want you to spread them across the target audience cells. However, again, if you're only having S1 and S2 involved, then you would complete the first column and target audience too. It makes it easier then when we import the files, it won't throw them out.
Yep, because essentially what happens is that if any of these drop-down boxes are overtyped, when we import it, it actually updates the drop-downs in Ruby. And it affects that, which then we have to then data cleanse within Ruby. So this is why we're really trying to just sort of give you the drop down options and then you just pick it, and there's no keying, bar the fields that are sort of free format where you can click into, for instance, like activity name. So hopefully that's all right. Right, moving on then, again, here's me scooting on too far. Let's work through just the rest of the fields then. Date delivered, really important. Okay. What we're looking for in there is just a date where it's 2 digits for the day, 2 digits for the month, and 4 digits for the year. And what that does is it just mean, because we did have some files where the date was blank, or it wasn't clear if it was just a day and a month, these sorts of things. So really, ideally, if we could have that in. Mrs. Robertson, do you want to unmute?
Hi there, sorry. See, likes of, I think you've got EDT Scotland as one of the examples. So that runs over 3 months. So what would you put for that? Or would you put each like interaction separately, if that makes sense?
I would put different interactions separately, because you have the launch of EDT, where EDT join you with another organisation to kind of launch it and meet the young people. And then you probably do different activities throughout that period. So again, it tells the whole story about what happened. And I know that we had McLaughlin and Harvey working with Merkland School, and we got a report back, and it was absolutely phenomenal, the amount of work that they did with McLaughlin and Harvey and the young people. And that's great if we can get a report back. But I would say, Sarah, if you're working with EDT and you've got specific timelines across that project, I would put them in. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you.
No worries. Okay, so yep, just showing like, to key in a date delivered. Okay, again, working across delivery facilitated by. So Rebecca, that was one that we came up against, where everything, a lot of fields were showing the school as such, but actually, again, Rebecca, from the DYW perspective, what we're looking for in there.
From the DYW perspective, it would always be DYW coordinator or regional group. And I get that sometimes the school has projects that they're running, but it's all about developing the young workforce. So it should fit into either of those categories. If you don't opt for one of those categories, then again, it doesn't show up on the Scottish Government report. So when we pull the report after we've imported them, it won't show up some of your fantastic activities that have been happening in the schools. We don't know why they've got them all listed there, but it's something we keep an eye on anyway, just to make sure. So if you select school or regional group in school, it does throw it out.
Okay. The next field along was, is this DYW partner activity? Now, what we had done here, again, was to create this file with the sort of help sheets to support you. And this was taken directly from the DYW sort of national team kind of guidance that was issued. But this is to give you an indication of whether it is a partner activity or not. So you can use this as a bit of a lookup. Again, Rebecca's there as a resource if you're still kind of not sure, but it's just to ensure that, like, when you're completing this, that this one literally is just a yes no drop down, but just to get it as accurate as you can. And again, if you're not sure, please just reach out. We're here to help anyway on that. So next one along, okay, is this a targeted event? So what we're looking at here is a targeted event, and I can give you a sort of an example, but this will be looking at if you were running a Girls into Engineering event in in your school or something like that, then that would be a targeted event because it's against a specific protected characteristic. But again, if it was a sort of open event, open to all, then essentially it's not a targeted event. So hopefully that's a simple kind of rule of logic so that you can distinguish between whether it is or not targeted. Again, Rebecca, any other examples that you would use in that scenario for the guys?
If you were working with young people from SIMD data zones, then you might put a targeted event.
Okay. So just to get
really based on the equalities.
absolutely. So the next part we start to move into is free format fields, where this is actually looking at the volume of the total young people delivered. Now, at the moment, Scottish Government are looking for like a value in the total young people delivered column for AI, and the total equalities delivered as a volume column as well. However, we do still actually have all the columns relating to the qualities and the protected characteristics. If you do have that information and you can put it in, it would be really good. And the reason why is it creates a rich picture of what activity you're actually doing within your school. But what this is actually allowing us to do at the DYW level is to be able to start to monitor and share the schools that run specific equalities events and targeting specific equalities, so that we've got that learning and sharing of best practice as well. So, you know, as much as Scottish Government will only look at these two values, but from the DYW support you get from Rebecca, the more information you put in terms of volume within these columns, the richer the picture is for sharing all the good work that you're doing, even with your colleagues across the region. Anything else there that you would like to add, Rebecca?
Like you said, if you have the information, then it's good to have it in there because it pulls through to KPI 4 on the Scottish Government report. If you don't have it, then you can't put it in. So don't get too caught up in. I know sometimes it's difficult when you've not actually been working with the group to check postcodes, etc. But if you have it, you have it. If it's a targeted event, you know that SIMD, or you know it's kind of giddles into construction, etc., then you know it's much easier to complete that part of it.
Okay, and yet, so all those fields there are just looking for a volume if you do have it, okay? And then what we get to is this notes column right at the end, and you'll see a sort of a comments box actually comes up here. So what can happen is one of the events that you may run might be a careers event. Now, let's say, for instance, it's got 10 employers. It's been delivered to, 100 young people. So what we're doing, Mrs. Robertson, I'll come to you in just a wee second with your question, okay? But the thing with the notes field, what we're actually looking for you to do in here is, if it is a group activity, and you're going to obviously add on each employer as a separate record on here. So using that example, for instance, delivering to 100 young people, what we need to do in the notes field is, if you can put the text group activity, activity name and date, okay? So for instance, I could put careers event, because what we're looking here is the ability to tag this information. And let's say, for instance, if we put that information in. So what happens is, when these files all get submitted by yourself actually into Rebecca, one of the things we've got to do is, we don't want to multiply up the number of young people that we're delivering to when that and over egging the event in its sense, because ultimately it was 100 young people. So what we then, by using that kind of tag, we assign a unique ID to each employer that participated in that kind of group activity, and it means that we get the numbers right when we import them of the young people delivered to. Mrs. Robertson, you've got a question. Feel free to just unmute.
Sarah, you're on mute.
No, sorry, I'd zoomed in to try and see the group activity and I couldn't get it out again. Sorry if I'm asking too many questions.
No, you're not.
No,
you're not.
I love it. Honestly, bring it on.
No, so it's probably a silly thing, but see, if you do know like the equality, so for example, what you said about the girls into engineering, it's quite likely that a girl is going to fall under, obviously, being sexual or gender in their kind of category, but they're also likely to be SIMD, care experienced. So when I was entering it in, was it May, I wasn't sure whether to count those people twice, because then when you get your total number, do you know what I mean? Is that young person, is that counting as two people? Does that make sense?
Yeah, because you're putting a count under each column, because then applies to both of them, really,
Yeah,
doesn't it?
yeah.
Rebecca, what's the preference there with that?
I think if you're putting the total young people delivered into the total young people delivered box, and then you're breaking it down into equalities, it's fine, because, you know, they might be SIMD, they might be gendered. So the important number here is how many young people it was delivered to. Does that make sense, Sarah?
Yeah, that makes sense, because when I was counting up the number of equalities, sometimes that was actually higher than the number of young people that had been delivered to. But as long as that's okay, that's
yeah.
fine.
No,
Because
that's fine.
it's probably because they met more than one protected characteristic then.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, exactly. Thank you.
Johnny?
Hi there, hope you're good. I have a quick question about when you were referring to the notes section and about, say, a careers event that has maybe 10 employers. I have
Yes.
a question about, we run a careers fair, I'm sure other schools are the same, that have like dozens and dozens and dozens of employers and businesses that come to see us. And I was wondering, I don't see it being a logistical possibility to do all of this for every employer, because we do get so many, and I can't think of the time it would take to do all that, and the logistical challenge, as well as teaching and doing other DYW commitments. Is there scope, like it was last year, to kind of give a collated list of those names to somebody to put them in? Because I don't think we can manage it logistically in time with the deadlines that are in place.
Johnny, if it's a smaller group, then just follow the sheet. If you think it's a huge group, again, just send them to me and I'll enter that. Is that okay?
Great. That's great, thanks.
Okay. So essentially what we've done there is, as long as you can, the notes field, really, as long as you can indicate in the notes field that it's a group activity, because we should be able to go back and we can see your date delivered, we can see the activity name and things like that. But that group activity indication in the notes is really important for us when we import it, so that we're not over egging the numbers. So what we just done there is covered the kind of file and all the fields as such, and what fields are, you know, they're pretty much complete as much as possible if you do have the information. That really is the sort of rule of thumb. What I'll just do is just open it up before I'm going to show you a sample file and also the employer link file next, but I thought I would just open up. Has anybody got any other questions on the fields in the file at the moment and what we're looking for you to complete? It's looking okay. Okay, no problem. Right then, so next thing, let's have a look at, again, this is just, I've used Bears Den, but the information in here is completely kind of made up as such. It is using real employers, but what I just want to do is highlight, so what we've got is, in effect, the file has been started to be completed, and it was to explain really, there's the reasons why the files will get rejected from Rubi in the majority of cases is that the employer number, employer name do not match the way that employer has been added on to Rubi. Now, the other thing, again, I appreciate with yourselves in the schools, that sometimes you're dealing with new employers and you actually don't know whether they're on the Rubi system or not. So what we had done, we worked with the national team, and we've got this file now. So the moment you've got an internet connection, this file will automatically refresh from Rubi, and it allows you to actually look up employer records, where you can pull off the Rubi number and the employer name and pop it into your import file. Okay, so for want of an example, just to sort of show you some of the things that we can kind of come up against. So if I go back to the dummy file, okay, I'm going to look at, it's Lark Hall Children's Centre, and I'm going to just go and look it up and let you see. So what we can do, ultimately, you'll be just clicking on this downward arrow, and it brings up a kind of pop-up menu with a search box. If I start to type Lark Hall, it will start to then, the more text that you actually put in, you'll actually see that it should then filter it down again. It might account for any maybe spelling errors, employer names as well. So to be mindful of that. So I'm going to just select this. So what this does is it shows me what Lark Hall Children's Centre's employer number is, and also the name. Now, what's quite interesting, if I'm just highlighting this and I'm just going to copy the ID number and the name, okay? What I would be looking for you guys to do, you can see that, see if we'd submitted that name in with the children apostrophe S, it would have been rejected by Ruby. So what we're looking for you to do, again, I'm just going to use, I'll go back and I'll just copy that. So what we are looking to do is really use that employer file as the Bible. Essentially, that's the kind of rule of thumb, that if your number or the name doesn't match, you won't have the number. You will need to look that up. But please just do check the name as well. And I would, as a rule of thumb, I would probably copy the ID number and the name from that file and just paste it into your import file on that side. Again, another example here will be sometimes the employer names because we don't know what they are in Ruby. If I just jump back in and then in order, all I'm going to do is hit the escape key because I'm not copying anything anymore. I hit the downward arrow, and where the filter is, I just switch on select all again. And then if I start to type in the name of that, the dental surgery, we can see that it's actually called Mac and Dent. I can untick the ones that I don't want. I pick up the appropriate employer ID number and name. Again, I'm going to copy and jump back. And you can see that in this file, it was only Mac and Dental. Again, that file, that would have been rejected because we did not have the full employer name in properly. And last one, again, just to give you a kind of idea of just how rigid Ruby is when it comes to the employer names. If I start to look at the Clyde Windows and Construction, you'll actually see here that the employer name has an ampersand instead of the actual text of and. Again, and believe it or not, another reason it would have actually been rejected. So that's some of the things there just to kind of highlight. So you all should now be issued with this employer file. And it's just a case where you can literally select all and it returns you back to the full list of employers that are actually on Ruby. Rebecca, is there anything there you'd like to add to help?
No, I think it's fairly straightforward. Always double check the spelling of the business in the employer sheet. However, again, Johnny, I know everybody's really, really busy. The reports are coming in monthly. I can double check them as well if you don't have time. But you need to let me know in plenty of time before the deadline.
Okay.
But the more you get used to using that sheet, the easier it becomes.
Yep. And the other thing to add there as well is that if you don't actually have and you can't find the employer in there, that's when you complete the new employer form. So again, you should have a copy of the new employer form and you would submit that with your import file. If you don't have the employer form, the new employer form, please let us know and we can get a copy sent over to you. Mr. Mitchell, you want to unmute?
Yeah, it was just to ask, I see the employer file there says their name. One of the issues sometimes when we're looking for work experience is having sufficient partners in different areas. So is it possible for there to be a description and contact details for these employers to be shared centrally so that if we were looking for somebody at Mac and Dental Care to get in touch with, that we can actually access that as well?
I can get that from Ruby for you.
Yeah, it's just that would be a handy resource because we do have some young people who have work experience where they can access that, and we do have other through contacts, and we do have other young people who don't. And then again, depending on the community that you're working in, you may or may not have access to more links. So if we had a more central register of that, that would be really helpful.
Yep.
Yeah, I think that's a really great idea actually, because we've got this whole kind of database of employers essentially. And I think, Rebecca, that might be one just to take note of, that that we actually create a sort of regional employer report, and that can be so it helps you identify employers possibly in your local communities and region to, as you say, to try and find employers for the young people for their work experience. So great shout, thank you.
Absolutely. If you're already working with schools and young people, then I'm sure that they'll be happy to support other schools and young people.
And sorry, just one other structural thing about the spreadsheet as well. If there was a possibility of adding the employer details as a tab in the spreadsheet, you would be able to do a kind of drop down and look up to save people having to manually look up things. So I'm happy to speak to somebody about how to set that up if that's of help.
Well, just to kind of, the reason why we kept the employers actually out of there is more because it's linking out onto the internet to refresh, and it can affect file sizes and things like that. So, and the other thing is we can hit security issues again, different council regions, different rules on firewalls and things like that too. That was the reason why we did actually keep the employer file separate for lookup, because we did think, oh yeah, it'd be great to have that one-stop shop file, but then that opened up a myriad of other considerations. So we wanted to try and keep the import file as flat as possible so that we wouldn't hit any kind of security issues there. But great shout, and again, thanks for asking.
Idea.
If we're being asked to do this on a monthly basis, then that would be helpful, because the worst we would have is a data set that's a month old, because I would agree with Johnny that this is quite a laborious piece of data that we're being asked to collect at school level. When we're talking about individual entries for every employer at an event, every pupil that's going to work experience. So anything that can speed it up would be really helpful for us.
We'll take it back.
Yeah, absolutely. So,
Thank you.
yeah, no problem at all. So essentially what we've covered is, again, just to kind of backtrack here, I took you through the kind of new file, which has some additional columns there, that and how we complete them, and again, that ideally try and complete it as much as possible. Yes, we are looking at kind of monthly submissions. Hopefully, we've tried to make the completion of the file as simple as possible to minimize actually what you have to physically key in, so that there's just drop down options, or you're posting names or volume numbers essentially. The other thing as well is the employer file. Yes, it will be separate for the time being just now for you to look up the employers. Again, and then the final thing is your new employer form. If you don't have that, please let us know. So you should be working now with 3 files. The thing you did say about the employer file is the moment you open that file up, it will actually automatically refresh from Rubi. So that it shouldn't be the case that you're opening a file that's actually out of date. We're not going to send you the employer file like every month on, which has been refreshed centrally at DYW. The minute we've sent you a file that actually will automatically refresh, and like that, if you can't find the employer on that file, submit a new employer form as that. So that essentially is the new file for to be completed for Q2. We've had an extension on the submission date. So Rebecca, the new date
It's the 11th of
11th.
September.
11th of September. So we were taking account of the fact we were running this session for you today. We couldn't expect you then to submit a file tomorrow. It was just far too much short notice, but hopefully with the monthly submissions rather than quarterly, we won't get that sort of bottleneck. And if we can at least complete it as and when, and again, Rebecca's here to support as well. But please, is there any other questions just now? All quiet, scared you into silence, have I? So we've got the recording. What we will be doing, so we're running 4 sessions today. So we've got North Lanarkshire, South Lanarkshire and Glasgow to also run today. Any questions that come up, we will be creating, for anybody who joined late, we will be creating a frequently asked questions resource, and the recording of this session will be available for you to share with colleagues in your school, and also any other colleagues from other schools that missed it. So hopefully you found this beneficial. Thank you for your participation, and thank you also for your interaction and your questions. That this file really is for you, so we're here to support you with it. but essentially, and yeah, we've done it in record time, so you'll be able to go and get a wee cuppa now then anyway. But thank you for your time, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
Cheers now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank
Bye.
you.